Welcome to Mentally Magnificent. This is an introductory video. I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Crystal Turner, and Mentally Magnificent is a place where we're going to go from being in spaces of shame, guilt, fear, loneliness, and not being in the place of our power to ascending to where we become the creators of the life that we would like to have through our spiritual healing and evolution, through our emotional healing, and through our physical healing. We are coming to that place from a place of wholeness. So holistic health is what Mentally Magnificent is all about. And I know that when we are whole, we are healed. And so that is what this space is about. And I want to tell you a story about my own personal journey to that, because I can tell you that I work in psychiatry. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I work in community dealing with people who deal with different dynamics of childhood experiences that have really followed them through their adult life and caused challenges in their adult life. But that's just a little segment of who I am. I am a person who's lived these experiences, who's navigated them, who's risen through them, and who continues to grow throughout this life journey that we all are on together. So sit down and let's just talk about what it is that really puts us in a place of feeling less powerful in our life, and how we can go to be in a place where we really recognize our power. And for me, that started very young, as for many of you, if you really sit and start to assess your life, oftentimes a lot of the hardships that we deal with in adulthood, they started at a very young age. And for me, I grew up in a home with both my parents, and I'm the youngest of four children. And if any of you know anything about the younger child, we tend to be outgoing, very curious, lovers of life, and leaders. We tend to be that. And I was all of that when I was a kid. And I remember being in my home and waking up on Saturday mornings with my siblings watching Saturday morning cartoons. If any of you remember the Smurfs, that's my era, watching the Saturday morning cartoons. And my dad being in the kitchen making his Saturday morning pancakes. Like, I absolutely loved my family. But I also do remember when that began to shift and change. And I remember being a young girl at 5 years old, being awakened in the middle of the night to the sound of my dad's rageful voice. And wondering in my mind, what's wrong with dad? He sounds so scary. And is mom okay? And I remember laying in bed feeling helpless and confused, because it wasn't the family that I had knew originally. So I just didn't understand what was going on. And as these experiences began to become more regular, because they did become more regular, I got to this point where I didn't know how to relate to my dad. And I really began to fear my dad. And I remember taking these emotions of fear out into my social atmospheres, where I felt awkward and inadequate. I tended to have experiences like that mirrored that in my social atmospheres, where I was treated awkward and in an inadequate way, that made me feel those ways. But I also remember still having good moments in my family, which is the thing that we can get really confused about, right? We could have these very difficult moments with our family, but then there could be these other moments that are like, well, these were also happy moments that I had with my family. So I remember even through those things, I would still during the week with my mom and my siblings, we would have like these great conversations. We would debate each other. We would be able to be in these spaces where we could verbalize our emotions and our thoughts. And we always had like these passionate debates that we loved. And I absolutely loved my family because of that. But I also remember that it was an unspoken thing in our home that none of me or my siblings or my mom ever spoke about. And it was how we would have these conversations in the evening, but it was this unified silence that began to come over us around 6:30 or 7 every evening. And I never knew it back then, but what I realized is that we were all dealing with the impact of domestic abuse, because my dad would come home at 7:30, and we just never knew what state he would be in. And so it caused a lot of tension in our home unknowingly, right? We never announced it. We never had the discussion about it, but it is what was occurring. And that fear that I had, it took me from being this very curious and outgoing young lady to more fearful and more submissive. And as I said, I took those emotions with me out into my social atmospheres. I dealt with bullying and shunning, and I held on to those identities very strong. And I took that throughout my young years into my teenage years. I carried that so much. And I don't know how many of you can relate to carrying a definition of yourself that was given to you at a young age that you didn't opt for. But I remember also trying to do the things that our society tells us will bring us joy, right? Outside influences telling us what will bring us joy. And for me, it was investing in my education. And so I got to this point through it all that I, started being really serious about school. I decided to go to college and to, pursue nursing. And so I went there and I finished and I graduated and I was all geeked and my family was celebrating me. I went on to get my first job as a nurse in dialysis. I worked as a dialysis nurse, and that was a big accomplishment. I bought my first car, bought my first condo, had children. I got married, bought a bigger home, all the things, right, that we look at as these types of achievements of climbing some form of a ladder. But I also remember every time the excitement would fizzle down from any of those accomplishments, those feelings of inadequacy, unworthiness, and shame and guilt always crept back up. And I remember being at this point, just being so helpless or feeling so helpless that I didn't know what to do. And so I remember asking out loud to God, to the universe, however you define this force that is the one force. I remember asking, to help me understand how to navigate out of these emotions, to help me get rid of these emotions, to help me understand, what it is that is to be the answer to escaping all of that. And I remember at that time, I was married at that time, not married now, but I was married at that time. And I remember my husband at that time was dealing with, some medical issues. He decided that he wanted to go vegan. And I wanted to support him in that because that's what I was. My life was about pouring into my kids, pouring into my husband. It was all about giving myself to other people, but not giving to me. So when he started this process, I wanted to do that with him. And it was such a good thing because we had all these people who were supportive, who were giving us all these recipes to start trying to do this new vegan lifestyle, which I had wanted to try for some time before that, but just couldn't seem to get it together to try it. And at this point, had all these recipes, all this support, all these guides, right, to help me start. And so I started doing all these recipes, cooking all these new meals, tasting all these new flavors. And as I was doing that and enjoying that, I remember also recognizing after some time that I didn't feel as depressed. I wasn't feeling as anxious. And it made me so curious to want to know, more about that. And so as I started studying more and getting into herbs and different herbs that can be helpful for the body, I came to recognize that a lot of those ways of using the diet and using herbs that were very common to a lot of African cultures. And so that made me want to understand a lot of cultural aspects in in Africa, like African cultural practices. And I remember coming across information that talked about principles that many used in certain African cultures. And those principles were really about how to use the mind as a tool. Rather than letting the mind use me, I could use the mind as a tool. And so that really intrigues me. And as I started learning that more, studying that more, and then applying that more, I remember feeling more whimsical and feeling more playful with life and feeling more open to life and allowing myself to have more experiences where I would usually hide and cut myself off from different experiences in life. I began to be more open to those things and start navigating and flowing with life a bit differently. And it was what really took me on this journey of self-discovery, because that's what it all was, this journey of self-discovery. And I continue that journey of self-discovery. And I say that because, I want to say to anyone who is dealing with feeling fear or dealing with a lot of fear or shame or guilt, I get it, because it makes sense when you think about maybe what you've experienced, younger in your years or experiences you've had in the past. But I also know this quote by Tracy McMillan, and it says, everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. And I really take that on and want to say to you that it can be difficult, but it can also be so rewarding to understand that you can open up your life to something so different when you're open and courageous enough to try something new. The things in the past that you may have tried, or maybe it's been difficult to try anything because you've not known what to try. But to try something new is more than likely going to give you something different from what you've always experienced based off of what you've always done. And when it comes to being in this place of navigating pain, past hurt, and feeling like you're just going in this circle and nothing's getting better, to step out of that circle and try a different element, try something different, will start to shift for you to have some different outcomes too. And that can be very rewarding in life. And so I encourage you and I invite you to come on this journey with me on this channel as we navigate the different ways that we can rise above our past hurts so that we can be better in life, better leaders, better in the work that we do. As I mentioned, I had a lot of successes in my life, but I never felt like I had what it would take to be what it was that I really desired to be, which was one who gave in healing spaces, that gave in my community, that could lead. I always felt that I couldn't do those things, or when I did them, I really was very hard on myself. If I made any mistakes in my profession, it would take me right back to these thoughts of being inadequate and not enough. And it's enough of that, because we are all enough, but we have to step out of this box that we've been put in and that we've sat in based off of some early on experiences that really have set the foundation of how we see ourselves, how we define ourselves, how we see the world, and how we see other people. There are beautiful people out here just like you are beautiful, and the world is beautiful, and we can get to the point of seeing that when we step out of the box of the pain that we've experienced that has held us captive for so long. So I want to be that support to you as you are someone who wants to have experiences in life. You might work in community already. You may work in environments where you are doing a lot, because a lot of people who've dealt with shame and past hurt and not feeling enough, we try and really rectify these parts of us by accomplishments based on the world standards. So we could be very accomplished in many ways, but this thought of not being what it is that we could possibly be constantly follows us. And so I invite you to stay in this journey with me on this channel. I will be here talking all about holistic wellness. I'll be talking about ways to be that spiritual alchemist in your own life. We'll talk about herbal herbal remedies that can be supportive to our mental health and our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, and our spiritual well-being. It's a holistic approach. And so, again, my name is Crystal Turner. I am your friendly psychiatric nurse practitioner who is going holistic. Well, not your nurse practitioner, but I am a friendly nurse practitioner who has gone holistic because I understand that to be whole is to be healed. Keep in mind that this channel is for educational purposes. It is for informational purposes. It is not taking the place of any kind of treatment that you feel that you may need to get from a medical professional in your area. It is for educational purposes only. It is for you to explore and consider if you choose to. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Talk to you later.